Well, let me tell you something, brother. You're listening to the sWo podcast. So all my sneakerheads, what you gonna do when the sneaker world order runs wild on you? Tune in every Wednesday with Ashley Clark, ACS Sneakers, Patrick Townsend, and Blazer Reggie. Enjoy the show, brother.
Hi there, and welcome to another episode of the Sneaker World Order podcast. This week, we've got a very special guest, Mr. Stephen Smith, aka the godfather of the dad shoe and creator and designer with Yeezy. So, if you'd like to shout yourself out, that'd be grand.
Yeah, hi. Stephen Smith, been doing this for 37 plus years. Started at New Balance. Did some of my favorite product there as a kid, 21-year-old, 22-year-old kid. And the journey just continued from there to several other brands, from Adidas to Nike to Reebok, and each place creating this iconic product. If you don't know them, then you're not in the sneaker game. So
Pat, yourself, mate?
Yeah, so my name is Patrick T. You can find me on YouTube under Patrick T. On Instagram, Patrick T for real. I'm a closet sneakerhead. I don't like calling myself a sneakerhead. I just like sneakers, as everyone knows. So, that's me.
Yeah, and it's Aidan from ACS Sneakers. Likewise, you can find me on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, all those places. I'm a devout sneakerhead. No closets over here with devout sneakerhead. And that's it.
Yeah, so there we go. So this is the lot today. We do have Reggie, who would normally jump in, but he's obviously been called into work or something. He's our resident Prince of New Balance, so he's probably kicking himself for this one. But all the same. Basically, Stephen, it's a kind of sell yourself episode for you, really, because we've all worn something you've designed, you've created.
no doubt.
So, I just wanted to say, so you said you started in your early 20s. So, I don't know how the college system really works, but over here, so in the UK, we have secondary school, college, and then you go into university. I think in America, you've got, is it high school, and then is it university after? Or
Yeah.
So when was it you decided that? Was it always trainers you wanted to design, or was there something else you was trying to do and just fell into this? Or how did it start?
There were two career tracks I was thinking about. You grow up an Irish kid in Boston, and you're either the police or you're running from the police, like Whitey Bulger. And so 7 of my cousins were police, so it was like the standard family track, I guess, that, or firemen or nurses. And but I also love to draw, so I wanted to go into car design. And at that time there are only 2 places to go, which it's still there's a little inbreeding in that, where you either go to Center Creative Studies in Detroit or Art Center in Pasadena. And I didn't know too much about those schools, and I really kind of didn't want to leave the Boston area. And my guidance counselor didn't know shit about industrial design, which is what my degree was in. And they had me apply to Boston University's School of Engineering, which I got in, shockingly enough, because you need to do a lot of math for real engineering. And I wasn't exactly the best at math, but I could draw stuff like you wouldn't believe. But I thought like an engineer, which was kind of an odd mix of things. And then I looked into it. I'm like, wait a minute, I've been tricked. This is like math and things like that are things I don't like too much. And so I talked to my art teacher. I'm like, look, this is what I want to do. What the hell is it called? And she's like, oh, well, you want to do, product design or industrial design. And she goes, I went to Mass College of Art in Boston. They have a program. Why don't you apply there? So I did, and I got in. And so that started my path. But parallel path to that, I ran track in high school and distance runner. And I always wore New Balance 990s because they wore like iron. So it was a good, it was a good value. It was the first $100 shoe, but it was a good value because they lasted forever. And so I ran in those. And then when I graduated, one of my friends who was in the graduating class before me lived up in Lawrence, where New Balance's R&D office was, and he had applied for like the second ever position they had for full-time designer, because at that time this was kind of a new career to go into. People didn't design sneakers. There was no place to learn it. We were product designers, or you were a shoemaker or pattern maker from St. Louis or Brockton, Mass, where the two traditional centers of footwear making were in the US. And so he's like, hey, New Balance is hiring again. He said, I applied a year ago. They had a hiring freeze. He goes, they just lifted the hiring freeze and reached out to me, but I started my own firm. Are you interested? And he goes, and by the way, I told them about you. You were this runner kid and you wore New Balances and you'd be great. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I applied, got the call, went up there, interviewed, got the job the next day.
So did you have to drop out of college then, or to get this job?
No, I had graduated and I was hanging out for the summer, and my mother was like, you got to get a job. I said, yeah, eventually. Yeah, let's work harder at it. And so
all parents have said that, though. All parents have said that.
Oh yeah, I got the job the next day, and that was the beginning of my New Balance career and my pathway into sneakers and sporting goods in general for design. And it was a very small company at that point. We were only at 110 to 112 million dollars annual sales, compared to today. They're a multi-billion dollar company, and there were only two of us, me and an African-American guy, Kevin Brown, and we were the design team, and we designed everything. Brownie liked basketball, so he did the court shoes. I ran, so I naturally did the running shoes. So the trainers kind of became my forte through there. And it blew my mind, like, okay, here I was running in these New Balances as a college kid, and now I'm actually able to design the stuff that I'm gonna wear and run in. I mean, it was really cool. Yeah. I get to design the successor to the shoe that I ran in and make improvements to that. And in those days, we had no seasons like there is today. Kind of the fashion world dragged Nike into that with like spring, fall, summer, back to school, holiday, all of the traditional kind of garment industry gates and dates. Back then would just be like, well, the 900 series is getting a little old. We figured out a new way to make a midsole and a better rubber compound for the bottom, and we got these nicer suedes. Let's do a new one. So that's how you kind of updated it. It wasn't like on any kind of like cadence or sequence or calendar. It was just like, can we make it better? Let's do it. And so that kind of became a guiding mantra in how I work and how I design stuff. Was like, it's not just new, it's new and better. Otherwise, we shouldn't really do it. Because so many people do new and different, and that's not real design. Anybody can do something different, but it becomes the challenge to new and better.
Yeah, so, definitely.
Sorry, I'm going to jump in again if that's all right, everyone.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
So, was there a time where you would release, say, 2 trainers in 1 year, or literally it'd just be, right, that's doing well, and then when you felt it was getting old or stale, or was it when new materials came to your attention or things like that?
It was kind of all of those things, when a style was getting kind of dated. You got to remember, at that point in time, state of the art was like, cut and buff midsole. This was state of the art. We couldn't mold it yet. And so as things started to advance rapidly, with poured polyurethane, that became the wedge on the New Balance, which became the end cap, which was a piece of EVA encapsulated in polyurethane that you poured. So all of a sudden we could create foam rather than take a sheet stock and cut it and buff it like a kitchen sponge and stick it to the bottom. And then slowly the industry figured out how to like heat press it and get a skin on it, and then raise that skin up to create sidewalls and details in it, multicolors, paints, things like that. It was all rapidly evolving because it became this almost like arms race between all the sneaker companies of who could one up each other. So as these materials were coming out, you'd be like, oh, now our thing looks really dated. We better do a new one. And so it kind of evolved along those lines. So it was kind of fun. Yeah, like I said, I was a 21-year-old kid right out of university, and it was a lot of fun because I learned from shoemakers and cobblers and stitchers how to do it all myself.
Yeah.
And that made me even more unique in this industry, because if you needed something made, I could go out in the sample room and make it myself.
Right.
And
okay.
Even the pattern makers teaching me how to make my own patterns. And I became more and more of this anomaly or unicorn, because I could do all of these things, not just draw the pictures.
Yeah, I think that's the thing with these days. Like I work for Adidas, and basically, when I was doing training and stuff like that, you're in a room and there's like specialist people who are. I'm specifically a designer, but what do you design? Okay, so I design this piece. They don't do the whole thing. Like there's somebody who draws it, there's somebody who does a certain part to it, and they build it all into one shoe. Whereas, your name still gets thrown around, obviously. And it's like, oh yeah, well, it does everything. You want to be someone like Stephen because he does everything.
Well, you had to, because we didn't have that support structure. The companies were smaller. I at New Balance, for example, there was no like mold department. I did the drawings that the metal would be cut from for the outsole or midsoles. It had to be very precise, because it was going from my drawing board to the mold maker to cut steel. Now everything's done with computers. You have CAD departments, you have mold specialists. It's like we had to do all of that. And you look back now and you see the army of people involved. And you're like, how did I do all that? It's kind of crazy.
I was going to say, do you miss the old days, or has technology made it easier for you? Or?
Aspects of it, because then you controlled the outcome more. And that's kind of why I enjoyed this after I started into it, versus as I learned more about the automotive industry, because the automotive industry was more like that. You could be the guy who does hubcaps for your entire career. You never do the car.
Yeah.
And what we do is very unique to this day, in that you design the whole thing. And the automotive industry wasn't that, even since the early days,
Yeah. So so I feel like I'm taking over here, but I've got so much questions.
Oh, it's okay.
And I'm not the New Balance guy here. I mean, Ashes really.
I've owned a few.
But isn't so you was in New Balance at 21, and you was there for number 2 or 3 years, or
2.5 years.
2.5 years. And you said you was with another colleague who you both designed. He'd done the courts and you done the running tracks.
Yeah.
Was New Balance at the time just specific to basketball and running, or was it what do you call them now? You call them casual trainers now, don't you? Like lifestyle trainers now. Was it just sports?
There was no such thing. These things became the casual trainers over time, as they were outdated, performance-wise and materials and process-wise. Now, we kind of did everything. We made tennis shoes, basketball, and again, I would I would help out if there was a big load. So that's how I ended up doing like the 650 and 550 and, the shoes that are revived right now by M. de Leon, and that, bringing back my old basketball styles, which always blows me away.
Oh yeah, I
but
bought a pair of 550s not even like 2 months ago, and they're
I
just
now need to get
everywhere.
a pair. I don't have any. But and so it's funny, there was a guy, Jim Crawford, and he was a former Olympian runner. He had worked at Nike Exeter back in the day. And Craw was in charge of all the European businesses. So we made soccer shoes,
Yeah.
football shoes,
Yeah.
And so Craw was always trying to do all these special things for the European market, because we had factories in Tralee, where were the others? There's this Tralee in Ireland, Flimby. There was, I'm trying to think of where the third one was. There were three in the UK, and so they always had these requests for very European focused sports. So I did squash and handball shoes. I did orienteering and fell running. So that was kind of fun, because I learned all these different sports that we didn't do in the US, and so like the Trailbuster came out of that program. It was meant to be a orienteering and fell running shoe, and then it just kind of became a trail shoe in the US as well for rugged trail. And there's another one that's a freaking icon I did, and it's like I was just trying to do the best product I could at that point in time and answer the questions from the consumer. What do you need? What would make it better? And I think that's why some of these things have taken lives of their own, because at that moment in time, they were the right answer to the questions being asked. And they became universal in answering those questions, and the styles became iconic. And I've never, one of the things that I've always strived for, I've never designed the same shoe twice. And you see a lot of designers who get stuck in like a groove or a rut, and they design the same thing over and over and over again. And it's like, I always thought, like, is that all you got? I mean, I got, what do you want next? Let's do it.
Yeah, we're not gonna jump anyone, but when you're doing 50 of one design, it takes a lot of engineering.
Yeah. And so, that's one of the things that's great with Kanye. He loves to see, but very, very like with his music, we're a lot alike in how prolific we are in our creativity and explosive. And you don't like that one? I'll do this one. You're like, I'll do this one. So we just keep creating and creating and creating. And it's,
so like, how hands-on is he? Because I have heard that what Kanye wants, he gets anyway. But like, so you're basically the pencil to his ideas kind of thing, or as well as an input yourself.
Back and forth. It depends on the model or the concept, or even where the inspiration comes from. We all feed off of each other within the team. It's like anything with any business. You're looking for an opportunity, a gap, or a hole, or again, to do something better. How could we do this that's better? And that's what's unique. It reminds me of those early days of New Balance, because we have no calendar. We just create, and it's raw creativity. And it reminds me of being a 21-year-old kid again, which is great, because you're like being a kid. Your eyes are wide open. You're learning everything new, like you've never seen it before. And that's what's refreshing about all of this. And that's how we come out with these styles, because we're not stuck to anniversarying the Pegasus. We did
everything's new.
We need to do 220,000 pairs this season. We need to take $1 out of the FOB and use the same materials. It's a formula, and it's like there's nothing formulaic about what we do. So that's what's refreshing about it. It's
definitely on an upward, isn't it? Because I don't think of all the companies you think of these days, there's Yeezy can't go wrong. Like everyone, even if people go, oh, don't like the look of that, don't like the look of that, a week later they're wearing it. They want it.
Absolutely. That's what's fun about it.
Like they can't do wrong. Like you get people that turn around about the Wave Runner, which, let's be honest, this is true. Everyone turned around and was like, oh, people own them, people love them. And it's not just resellers. People just love the look of them. And now you get companies like Asics who are trying to copy it, who are literally making a like for like near enough, but it's more plasticky looking. But they're making a like for like of original idea.
Yeah, I mean, that was to me, that's one of the most comfortable shoes I've ever worked on. And it was a complete paradigm shift for the industry, in that everything was this Roshi running, simple, Nike driven, cost reduction driven model of no sewing, minimal pieces, just almost to the point of being generic. And when Kanye asked me to start drawing that thing, I'm like, what is he asking me to do? Like, that's not where it's headed. And basically what we did is, we tripped everybody else, stuck our foot out in front of them. They all fell down, and we ran ahead of them and came out with this thing nobody else was doing, and shifted the entire market.
I read a wicked quote about I think we've jumped into Kanye. I wanted to know more about you, but we'll jump backwards and forwards. I'm sorry, but I read a wicked.
We'll get to how it's all a circle. So go ahead.
Yeah, but one quote I did read about the Yeezys was that when I looked at it, it was so right. He said he reset the trainer industry.
Yeah,
and you look back at it, and you can actually see where it happened. You go, he stopped everyone.
Yeah,
he put it out there, and everyone was criticizing. I remember my first 350s. I mean, I don't know if you had anything to do with those, but I remember, I don't like them. I just don't like them. They're not for me. They're not the tradition, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And then someone wore them and said, Pat, you need to wear these. And then from that point on, I said, yeah, everything stops now. We have to restart, and everyone has to rethink everything, because you're going back to the materials are great. You're not shrimping on anything. He's got overlays, which on top of overlays, and it's great. And it just changed everything. I can remember that quote there was just so poignant in that sense. It just made complete sense to me. So
yeah, it was funny when we were working on it. I'm like, what is he asking me to do? And I took a couple sketches, we blended them, we hybridized them, we sent them back and forth over email, because I was up here and he was down in California, and we did everything remote for 48 hours straight, and out of it came this thing. And the thing that's cool about it, one of my fortes has always been, everywhere you draw the side view of the shoe. And to me, when I worked with the pattern guys, the magic happened when it went from 2 dimensions to 3 dimensions. You could see where you wrapped a piece around the heel in the 2-dimensional sketch, but then when it came together and you turned it around and you saw like a whole new dimension or dynamic of what was happening with that pattern as it was interpreted into 3D that you didn't even visualize. And so it kind of became this obsession of mine that no matter what angle you looked at it, it looked right, it was balanced, it was finished. There's no line that didn't make any sense. And you can see a lot of other companies' product where you turn it around, like, what the hell's that? Or it's too front heavy in the design, or it's too back heavy in the design. It's like the stuff that I've worked on, that's always something I strive for, is no matter what angle you look at it, it looks good and right. And the Wave Runner was kind of an embodiment of that philosophy. But after it all kind of made sense when it came out, and it shifted the market. It was disruptive, and I've been known as a disruptor, and for good or for bad. But after he was like, you know what I made you do? I'm like, what's that? He goes, I made you design your New Balance running shoes as if you still work there 30 years later. And I'm like, yeah, you did. Look at it. And the funny thing about that particular shoe is you can look at it and like, is it from the 80s? Is it from the 90s? Is it from the 2000s? When is it from? And it's one of those, it's like a lot of the product that I've had a hand in. You look at it and of course it is. It's all of those. It's none of those. It's from now, or is it from yesterday or tomorrow? You don't know. That's what makes these iconic product, is that you can't pin it to a particular date, even though it was released on a particular date.
Yeah, it's like the revitalization of the Reebok Fury now.
Yeah,
Like
it
now
never
people
ends.
are looking at it and they're like, oh, that could be around the same time with Yeezy now, because they're all everyone's kind of looking at them as out there shoes. Yet that was made, 20 odd years ago. And
Yeah,
again, something that you made.
I first sketched it in like 91, 92. And it took us 2 years to find all the people that could make the components, because we went outside the footwear industry for it. Aerospace companies, biomed companies, to make all those components. And people don't realize that over 50% of that shoe was made in America at these various very high-tech and aerospace companies. And then we sent it over to Asia and they put it together. So it was a very different shoe, and people still look at it like, is it from the future? Is it, even though it was from yesterday, but it's from the future. Still, it looks like nothing else, and so I've been called the alien designer from the future by a certain person, saying that I had
that was originally the first kind of laceless tightening shoe. Like everyone's trying to do it now. Everyone's trying to do it. You got Nike with Adept technology and everything like that. We saw it on films and everything, but you actually created it. And
yeah,
I think everyone remembers having some pumps and just being like, yeah, Reebok have got
Reebok
this.
pumps, yeah.
Well, it was funny at that point in time, even from day one. When I was in art school, I was a huge Bauhaus follower, Walter Gropius, Marcel Breuer, and the crew out of the Bauhaus. So I always looked at it. I was making machines for running. They weren't like sneakers or fashion. It was a machine or a piece of equipment for running, and that's the way I always viewed my stuff. It's like I'm building a machine. And the Fury was like the embodiment of that. It didn't look like a sneaker anymore. It looked like something else from outer space or something. It was a machine. It wasn't a foot covering at that point. And that's what I loved about it.
Okay, so I'm going back in your history now. Sorry to if I'm thinking. So you're at where did you go from then, and what tempted you to leave New Balance? Was it?
So I went from there to Adidas, and Adidas headquarters was in New Jersey at that point for North America. And I just looked at, so my development guy, who ended up becoming like my development partner for life, because I still dabble on projects with him occasionally, just as advisory level, or we steer each other. I need something, he tells me where I can find it. He needs something, I tell him who can do it. In fact, this morning even, but my development guy left and went to Adidas. And he was like, they're looking for some good designers. And I told them about you, that you'd be awesome for this. And I was like, wow, it's in New Jersey. I like Massachusetts, it's home. And but my brother lived down there because he worked for Bell Laboratories at the time. And so my brother's like, well, you can live with me, and it's not far. And I was like, okay, that'll be fun. I'll live with my older brother. And so I went down, and it also seemed like on the product arena, that was the next leap. It was like going to work at Nike or Adidas was like the bigger league,
Yeah.
And so I got there, and the place was a mess, and the US business was on life support. Run DMC had come out, they had a blip. And at that time, it was very New York. The whole business on the East Coast was very New York focused. And the kids in New York were very fickle. They liked you, and then they didn't. And they liked us for Run DMC, and then they didn't. And so we had nothing to fall back on. They came out with the first grouping of torsion shoes. And the colors at that time, you look at it now and it seems kind of normal, but the colors at that time within the US industry, people were like, get that crazy ass shit out of here.
Coming in with some aquas.
Oh yeah. People look at like the ZX series now and they're like, oh yeah, it was amazing. It's like, we couldn't give them away.
Wow.
And so we had to go back and reinvent that stuff, tailor it for the US. The Germans were very much in control, like, yeah, that's not what we're doing. And it's like, yeah, but you hired us to to fix the US, but you've got our hands tied, you know, so it's this constant battle. So they let me do what they call the basket shoe. So I got to do basketball, and that's when I did shoes like the Artillery and the Phantom, and you know, other iconic shoes that today are still part of their line, whether they like it or not, because there's accounts that still look for them, you know. And then here I am with Ye, and Kid Cudi goes, doesn't even know what I did, goes and picks the Artillery for like his favorite shoe to be like a Kid Cudi shoe. And so it's kind of funny to see all these strange things come together and overlap and intermix through all the different years of and cultures that I've touched. So yeah, so there I did basketball and some tennis, excuse me, and I did some successors to the ZX line. And oddly enough, they let me do the football shoes, which was weird because I did all like the Beckenbauer series. You guys probably played in them as kids.
Yeah, we had Beckenbauers.
I had World Cups. I had everything. everything black and with the 3 white stripes. Those are the ones. But you know, it was when I was younger, they had to last.
Yeah.
And the Adidas lasted. That was the thing. And you know, your mum's not going to go and buy you 2 sets of boots for 1 season. So you know, and the leather was great. You could, but I'm saying it now, I'm a grown man, but you didn't have to clean them.
Yeah.
Still working them, you know? So, and they just wouldn't mold or anything like that. They were just great. I mean, even now, I mean, those iconic boots are still the ones to get, and they still pull a hefty price tag too. You know, it
still blows me away that they let this 23-year-old American kid do the football shoes. You know, like, okay, whatever. What, you're going to let me do the European sports? Let's go. You know, out of it came again some more iconic product that people always remember.
Yeah.
So for yourself, then, if you'd have to say the one kind of holy grail for you that you are most proud of, it's going to be difficult. Don't get me wrong. But if you was to say, right, this is my most kind of proud creation, what would you say it is?
You know, it's kind of hard because I've done so many. I mean, the Fury is definitely one of the most popular because it was disruptive. It's still futuristic today. I basically risked my entire career at Reebok over it to get it made. There were people who were trying to fire me after Enduring.
That's the funny thing is, though, that's the shoe that's keeping them going now.
50% of their overall business is that one style that I did.
Yeah.
You know, I had to go up to Paul Fireman and throw my career on the fire and go like, look, all these shitheads are in the way, and you told me you wanted to do this thing. Can you clear the deck? And he did. He told them, you fucking tell them I told you to do it. And I'm like, okay, good, thank you. I'll relay that message. And you know, people were afraid of it, and that's good. You should be afraid, because that means I'm doing something right. You know, because if you are comfortable with it, it means we're just going to anniversary numbers, or you know, you can just write the check, send it to Foot Locker, and they go, oh yeah, great, another white shoe for $55, thank you. You know, but when this thing came out, when you saw that thing on the wall when it was new, people were like, what is that thing? You know, they had to go see it, they had to touch it, they had to see how it worked. And there were so many forces against us at that time with that shoe, you know, from internal people trying to quash it because it doesn't fit in the rest of the line. It's like it redefines the line. That's what you have to look at, you know. This to me was the Dodge Viper, you know, something that was totally in your face, that reset the brand in the industry. And the Viper did. It reignited Chrysler. It showed them that they could build this insane muscle car that was, together with Shelby, is like this modern iteration of what the AC Cobra was. And it reset Chrysler in the industry here, you know. They've rocketed up to status. And to me, that's what this was. This was a reset for the company. Like, this is what we're about. This is what Paul Fireman told us to do. Go show me things I've never seen before. And that's what we did.
So would you say around, should you say around that time, I mean, like you said before, you started New Balance, you went to Adidas, then you started working at Reebok, Fila, Nike, and then Yeezy. You must have been building a reputation by the time you was ready to leave.
Good and bad.
But your name was known. You know, your name was known
a
now.
Prick.
There's no such thing as bad publicity. Let's be honest.
So, how did that go in terms of your next step, your next?
So what happened was Adidas, it just seemed like it was going to continue as a hot mess. They were going to shut down the US office. They told us all, you can move to Germany or ride out what happens in the US. Most likely within 6 months, the US office wasn't going to exist. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to Nuremberg. And so it was funny. One of the guys I worked with at New Balance was this guy, Steve Burris, and he was the original developer of the LDV at Nike Exeter. And he came to New Balance probably 6 months before I left. And so we worked together on the 1500 and 997 and some of the bigger styles. And I really liked him. I liked working with him. And he kind of gave me the freedom to create and push the envelope for things. And so I was at Adidas almost a year to the day at that point. And
so it's very quick then. It wasn't.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay.
It was weird. And so the last 3 months, Burris would call me every 2 weeks. So he left New Balance and went to Reebok, and he was trying to set up their advanced concepts team, which is similar to like the Kitchen or what was previously known as Ape at Nike. And he was going to set up something like that at Reebok. And he's like, you would be the best designer for this. I think that, of all the people that I've met, why don't you come up and do this? And I was like, I don't know, things aren't so bad at Adidas. And then things were bad at Adidas. So he called me
last words, yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I'll come up and talk. And so it was back home. Reebok was like 15 miles from where I grew up. My parents still live there. So I interviewed, got the job the next day. And then they didn't have the team together yet, but they were still kind of forming it. So I got there and I did cross training and some basketball. And then finally they got us our space and, announced the team. And first they announced that there was going to be a team. And then everybody on the Reebok design team was like, I'm going to be the designer. I'm going to be the designer. And I quietly sat there and was like, okay. Yeah. And so they kind of put together this group of weirdos. We always called ourselves the Island of Misfit Toys from Rudolph. So there was myself, Paul Litchfield, and Peter Foley as the two development counterparts. And those guys were very funny. They both had biomechanics and engineering backgrounds, but neither one was doing anything related to that, because as Reebok had this explosive growth, they're like, Litch, I know you were hired to work in the research lab, but now you're marketing for hoops and pump. And Foley ended up being like, you're going to be, I don't know what you're going to be. You can be marketing for entertainment and running. And so he ended up, so they kind of like, we didn't fit anywhere else. So like, put these guys together, and we were all such like freaks, but we had the common mindset of like, let's push the envelope and let's do things people have never seen. And that's kind of what Fireman charged us with. He's like, you guys go dream, build the dream. Don't let anybody in your space, lock yourselves away like a think tank, blue sky. And the last person who should have access to what you're doing is myself, because I'll be too tempted to take it away from you guys before it's right or too early. So it was very funny. He knew he'd be too tempted to take these things. And that's one of the things you run into in any kind of innovation role is you want it to be done, you want it to be right, but the company is like, we need it now. And it's like, it's not ready. We'll finish it or we'll take it forward. Like, but you don't understand from day one what it was about, the intent, the story. And so it was this constant struggle and battle for that. And luckily we had Paul Fireman there as the arbiter or the lawyer to go like, back off, they're not done. They showed it to me. And, you know, we kept him interested in things and gave him new things like, you know, Hexalite, Graphite, DMX, Pump, Instapump, ZigTech, all of that stuff kind of came from these three clowns that they didn't know, you know, people like those guys are strange, you know. And
so you
so,
was like the original IT men then, you know, the strange lot who sit in the room on their own and, you know,
yeah,
no one understands what's going on.
so there was a magic to it. You know, we always said neither one of us was the smartest person in the room, but when you put it together, magic happened. It's like that dream team, but it's not like you predicted, you like, these guys will be the dream team, or like, let's put these guys together. You know, Fireman was like, and with Burris, let's put these guys together and see what comes out of it. And it was just this magical time where we created so much stuff that Reebok couldn't even digest it. Which is why, you know, after I left, you know, 10 years later, they were still pulling stuff out of my files and archives and things that Litch and Foley and I had all worked together on, and feeding the brand and the pipeline with it. I mean, it was weird.
Wow.
And so I look back at it as, you know, it really was a magic time. All three of us are still really good friends. We stay in touch with each other, visit each other when we're in the same location. But I always look back on it as, you know, 10 years later, they're dragging stuff out of our folders. And I'm always like, said, oh, you got, you know, you couldn't one up us after 10 years. Come on, there's supposed to be smart kids coming up. And so anyway, it makes you realize like how magic those times were to have had that freedom of creation. There was nothing.
So is there
planned.
anybody that, like, design wise, when you've worked at various places like Adidas, Nike and stuff like that, is there anyone, you know, because obviously Nike had like Tinker Hatfield and stuff like that, were there designers that you would look at and go, oh wow, I'm going to be the next one of them?
I never thought I was going to be the next one of anybody. I was going to be me. The one thing that is different is, so when I was at New Balance, 22 years old, the sock racer came out. And I credit Bruce Kilgore to a lot of what I wanted to do, because that thing came out and I was like, what is that? That is like nothing else. And that to me was a turning point for me philosophically. Was like, I want to do that, not that shoe, but I want to do that type of product that is, people are like, what is that? And it wasn't just different, it was different because it was better. It was the kind of the first minimalist thing, stretch upper, just those two straps, simple one-piece PU bottom with the full length Zoom bag in it. Well, at that point it was just low profile airbag in it. And I was like, holy shit, that's what I want to do. And it made me want to go to Nike. So from that point on, I was trying to figure out, you know, I didn't want to leave home, but I would have had to go to Oregon, and it made me want to work there. And so that's what always drove me to it. So I always, you know, Kilgore probably thought I was full of shit when I told him, like, dude, you changed my life with that shoe. And then when I got there, you know, I interviewed in '91 the first time with Tinker and Mark Parker when the company was much smaller, and Tinker thought they hired me. I'm like, well, you were supposed to tell them to hire me. What happened? Oh, I don't know. I got caught up in this and that. I thought they did. And I'm like, well, they didn't. And so when I finally got back the opportunity in, you know, '97, I went back there, and first thing I did was go to see him. I'm like, dude, I'm here finally. He goes, oh, I thought we hired you in '91. You never looked around? You know, it was very funny. So we became really good
for 7 years, and he just thought you was around the building somewhere.
Yeah, he thought they hired me. And so we become really good friends. You know, I visit with him at least once a month, and we talk about stuff. And it's very funny. People don't realize it, but like Tinker and I started at the same time. He was still the architect until '86, and I started in '86. And, you know, we've been designing the hits for the same amount of time. So it's kind of fun. He's a good guy, good friend. And, even though we're on opposite sides of the
Yeah,
army,
the
right?
next Nike and next Yeezy look quite similar.
Yeah, it's just it's never work.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's it. Like, yeah, when you both work within the same thing, I guarantee it's no, we're talking cars.
Yeah, exactly. We talk Porsches, boats. He's got this little wooden sailboat, and we talk about the boat. I helped him like jig up his trailer and stuff with it. Volkswagens. He's got a cool Volkswagen bus. So yeah, we're good friends outside of the workplace. You obviously don't want to reveal anything to the competition, but you could still have friends. And Nike treated me shitty at the end, but I can't hold him responsible, or the individual. There are individuals I hold responsible, but he wasn't one of them. He was a friend and a supporter. Same with Mark. Mark I still consider a good friend. But yeah, it's
So I mean, we know you also worked for Fila before.
Yeah.
you thought
it was like Adidas Part 2. It was a hot mess.
really, because I mean,
Yeah.
for us, Fila, I mean, being in Europe, it was a European brand for us. It was the
Italian.
yeah,
Beyond
it
board.
was the sleek style of sports, if you
Very
know what I mean.
Italian.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did that come about? I mean, you've been in America. Was it something they were trying to do over there? Because I remember seeing some basketball players with like the Fila headbands and things like that, but I didn't really think they were that big in America.
So it was very funny. While I was at Reebok, I met Kevin Crowley, who was the head of design at Fila, and he did like the Stackhouse and the first Grant Hill, and he had actually done the Wilson Pro Staff tennis shoe, like the Wilson tennis shoe.
Yes.
And so real interesting character, really eccentric, a lot of fun, just a kook, And so I met him. I like this guy, and so he tried recruiting me early on while I was at Reebok. And I'm so what's the office like? It's just me and this guy Rui in my garage, And Kevin had on this dirty John Deere farm hat and a barn coat, just looked like he rolled out of a drunken stupor. And I was like, I don't know, dude, going from like a state-of-the-art building here at Reebok to working in your garage, it's a little risky. And so the conversation always stayed alive. And when things were getting stupid at Reebok, when people put a target on me for the Fury, I called up Kevin and was like, hey, let's talk again, And he's like, Steven, it's great to hear from you, let's get together. And so he's like, I'll give you this, this, and this. You could just be a blue sky dreamer. And I'm like, oh. And so I was like, see ya to Reebok, because, Fila had a couple offices at that point. But when we got there, it's not Kevin's fault. The company was in bad financial situation, but because of its other ties into the holding company, which was Agnelli family, with Fiat, Ferrari, Magneti Marelli, all Bank of Italy, all of those were we were all part of that family. And so there was resources, but the Fila business itself was not good. We were trying to save it, basically. And they wanted to go from that headband Bjorn Borg fashion image to the headband Bjorn Borg winning tennis image of performance. Because they had had a strong impact in the US in the lifestyle side. But they wanted to get more performance oriented once they signed Grant Hill and some of the other players that we had in the livery. And so I got to work on a lot of dreaming things and futuristic 2A ideas for their cushioning systems, different fit systems, did some track and field. Herman Silva we got to work with, which was really cool. And then I got to work directly with Grant Hill, go down to LA, spend time with him, show him the designs. And so there was a Grant Hill shoe I worked on that never got realized, released. We had built a few rounds of prototyping. He loved it. They went with some other design of it, which he didn't know about. And all of a sudden he's like, what's this? And this is the one I was working on with Steven. Why aren't we doing with that? And so it got to be kind of a shit show. And they talked about how they were going to close the office in the US. And it was like Adidas Groundhog Day Part 2, like you can move to Italy or you can stay there and see what happens, or you can move back. And so it was Fila that moved me out to Oregon.
Right.
And so when all of that stuff was going crazy, they're like, you can move back to Massachusetts or you can move to Italy. And I'm like, well, at least if I move back to New England, there's other companies I could go work for. If I move to Italy, I'm kind of stuck in the middle of Torino, and there wasn't a lot of other work there. So I'm like, well, I'm not going to get stuck in Europe. I'll put them off. I'll say I'm going to move to Massachusetts, but I'll put them off because my wife and I really liked it here in Oregon once we finally got here. I called some people back at Nike. One of my friends was friends with Mark Parker. He called Mark, and then boom, I got an interview. They had one open head count, so they wedged me in while they had an opportunity, and that's how I got in. I got into Nike, and I kind of stayed in running, focused on Bowerman, pure performance, track and field, and the first 5 years there was magic. It was again that there's moments of dreaming, freedom, and then as a business matures, it becomes restrictions, boxes, lanes, guardrails, and that's not for me. I've always been known as this explosive designer and not being contained. And again, like that one, I'll design you something else, and they were like, well, you do 4 designs, we have a committee, they pick 2, goes to another committee, we pick 1, that's the one we develop. You do the first round of sample, we critique it, you do the second round of sample, you do some testing, and you don't deviate from this funnel, and I'm more like a shotgun of explosive ideas, like we could do all of this, and like, no, we want one. And I get bored with that. It's like, because as you're working on it, you see something else. Or I could do this to make this better. I could do this to make it better. And again, you can see how Ye and I work, because people like waiting for Donda to come out. But it's the same kind of thing where like, no, I can do this vocal better. Let's do that vocal. And it's the same mindset to this. It's like, it's not perfectionism. It's just, I can make it better. So why don't I? And so it's part of why we get along so well, but it's also part of why I didn't fit in the corporate culture of marching slowly, one step at a time. I like to take the leaps. They told me, like, take the leap from here to there. And so I always, the only way I can equate it is a cruise missile. You've programmed the target, and then you hit the launch button, and I'm going there, the big picture. I'm looking at it from 10,000 feet. I'm not looking at it from the next step away. And so many other people look at it as like, I always have the end in mind, and they're just one step away. And then somebody's like, oh, look out, there's a crack in the sidewalk. So you step over here. They're like, oh, look out, there's a puddle, and you're over here, and then you're over here. Instead of, you're not going here anymore, you're going someplace over here. And I'm always like, well, you told me to go here, so I'm gonna put this back over here. We're going that way. And they're like, well, no, I don't think. And yeah, this guy thinks. I'm like, I don't care what they think. I'm not designing for a guy sitting in his office at 45 years old at Nike who's a multimillionaire from stock. I'm doing it for you guys. I'm doing it for the kids. I'm doing it for the market. I'm doing the right thing for the consumer and the user. And that, to me, that's who I serve, to make the thing better. But there you were distracted by egos or insecurities of people, like, well, I don't think. I'm like, well, are you going to buy it? Well, no. I'm like, well, it's not for you, don't worry. I'm discounting your opinion.
I think, to be honest, the biggest kind of tell of that, what we've had very recently, was Yeezy Day versus Sneakers Day in Europe.
Yeah.
Yeezy Day, massive success, amazing. Everyone was bigging it up, how well it did, how well it was planned, how well everyone was able to cop something. Everyone was so happy. Sneakers Day, absolute flop.
Yeah.
Absolute flop. Like we did a live about it and we were discussing it out. Well, I was just like, no, you know what? I'm not going with Nike. I can't be doing with it. I'd sooner, like, what's happening now with Yeezy and the design and everything like that. They're in the right direction because it's innovation constantly.
Right.
And this isn't a spare on. This isn't a spare on any other company, but
business.
That's it. Like
reinvent a new way to do it.
Yeah.
Smash convention. This is the way you do it. Okay, we're going to do this then. You know, I mean, and that's been our success. And it adds to the variety, and it is innovative. It's taking it to a new place and it's been done the same. Why do we do it this way? Well, that's the way we do it. It's like, no, well, why don't we try this and let's do this because this looks like it should work better, and it ends up being right, as uncomfortable as it is. That's when you know you're onto something. Again, when it's to be a disruptor, does it make the people who are sitting back, who would love, you know, this stuff's hard. People like to take the easy route. I've never been the easy route. It's the difficult road, but it gets you the most success and the payoff at the end of the day because it's hard. Other people don't want to do it, so I'll do it. Come on, bring it, you know, and that's kind of what has embodied me. And it's also what pisses people off because they're like, oh, I said it couldn't be done and he just showed me up, you know, and it's like, just have an open mind, try it. If you never try it, you've already failed. You've failed yourself. Why fail yourself? You know, if you've given up, you've given up. To me, that's you've given up. Yeah. And I'm like, fuck yeah, let's go. Let's do something other people can't do. Let's do what's hard. Because other people are scared of it or insecure, or like, what if we fail? Well, what if you win? You know?
Yeah, I mean, it's a life thing, isn't it? Because I mean, you go to the gym, you have to fail in terms of how much you can lift to lift more.
Exactly.
You know, you have to have that failure. And you talk to, when you read a lot about millionaires and things like that and how they got there, and they failed more times than they've actually won.
Exactly.
You know, so I definitely agree with that. And it's that comfort zone thing. Everyone likes to be in a comfort zone because they know what's going to be around the corner. You know,
you learn.
Right. So I get that. So just going back to Nike, we know you left Nike. It didn't sound like it was the greatest part in the talk. When did Kanye come on there? Sorry?
I was asked to leave.
Okay.
Bet they regret it now.
I thought it was a mutual kind of, you know.
It got the same feelings towards Nike recently. Trust me, it's all good here.
Okay, so when you departed from Nike,
yes.
How did you and Kanye meet? How did that happen? I'm calling Kanye like I know him, but he's just, you know.
Well, it's kind of funny. I went back to Adidas at that point, and I went into their futures department, which is at that time was AIT, and I went completely away from footwear. I did apparel and electronics in their whole My Coach system for the.
Oh right, yeah.
Not the shoe pod one, but this is the one that went to pro level players that real time monitored their health in location. So it was for MLS here and FIFA in Europe for all of the soccer teams. And so I was designing electronic embedded smart garments, electronic devices, transmitters, antennas, base stations, kind of what goes way back to what my original college degree was shaped around. Because that's what I learned how to design, what was in Boston at that time, which was the early days of the computer industry and tech. And so this was fun because it was kind of going back to college and doing all of this high-tech electronics blended with sporting goods, with apparel, and it was a lot of fun. And they eventually took my headcount and moved it to Germany, and I'm like, I'm not going to Germany, so that was the end of that. And so then I ended up at Keen, because Keen has a factory here in Portland where they assemble things. It's not really truly made in USA.
Sorry, I'm seeing a pattern here. Every company you go to seems to want to throw you to Europe.
Yeah.
They want you to come and live with us.
So I'd go to Japan. That's the only other place I'd go. But
I think we'd all go Japan.
so I was at Keen and I worked on with the owner's son, I don't know if you've seen the unique robots that knits the unique sandal. So that was one of my projects. So it was great. Back to tech, back to manufacturing, building this factory up in the US. And then the owner wanted me to build the factory, but he didn't want to give me a nickel to do it with. So I'm like, it's kind of a no-win situation. And one day I just quit and I walked out. Wow. And I went home and my wife's like, how was work? I said, I just quit. She's like, what? You know, you got a family. Fuck it, I can't do that. You know, she's like, well, what are you going to do? I said, I really don't know. And so the first week went by and it was okay. And then the second week it hit like, oh snap, I really don't have a job. But like New Balance and Reebok both heard I was loose and both were, you know, I got calls from both squads and they're like, it was funny, they both had the same idea. Would you come back and be maybe the voice of history for us for the products that you've done for us? I'm like, that'd be kind of neat. I said, I don't want to move. If I can stay here, we'll figure something out. So they were going to talk to management and it kind of, it didn't go cold. It wasn't moving fast. And like, I needed a job. And then it was weird. Monday night, the phone rang and it was this weird New York number and I picked it up. Because I normally wouldn't answer an out-of-state call because it's like the stupid thing that just called me then, like some solicitor or something.
Yeah, double glazing or something.
Yeah, like, hi, I would like to talk to you about your extended warranty on your car.
You had a PPI in the last 5 years.
And I'm like, well, that's funny. My car's from 1958, so I think the warranty expired a while ago. And so I picked it up. I was like, hello. I was like, Mr. Smith. And I was like, hey, hi, it's Kanye West. And I'm like, what's up?
Phone call.
No, I knew it was him.
Oh, really?
And he was like, you know, he goes, I love all your designs and I'd love it if you would come design with me. And I was like, oh, interesting opportunity and an interesting time. You know, it was like God, the message.
Wow.
And it's interesting, you know, as he became more exposed about his religious beliefs, it totally made sense. You know, here I was in a dark place. Keen was like a weird other dimension, and I walked away from it into the dark. I didn't know what I was going to do, and I look at it as like God had Kanye find me and reach into the dark and pulled me to the light and gave me this incredible opportunity. And, you know, together with other people on the team, we've created this magical product. And it's been amazing, you know, and I always tell them, thank you, you know, it was a blessing.
So just for the podcast, just clarify what the product is, because people can listen again. What's the product if they don't know?
Yeah, I mean, the first one I worked together with him on was the Wave Runner, and then the 500 and 500 boot and desert boots and everything. You know, you touch some piece of it. 450 early on with the foam runner, but then I kind of drove some of the manufacturing side of that to bring it to a new dimension on how to make it. And so yeah, it's been this, it's all like every other place has had this moment or a high point, like the Reebok days with the blue sky, with Paul Fireman empowering us. The first 5 years I was at Nike, where you could dream. And, you know, things like the Spiridon, Cage Zoom Spiridon that Stussy just latched onto came from that era. Yeah. The Spectrum with the flames, I had originally done that for Japanese Ekiden racing kids, and then Paula Radcliffe goes and breaks the women's world record in it. And that one was brought up by Supreme. And it was that era at Nike with the blip, and then Keen with the robots and some of the things I was doing there. And then it would, you know, it tapered off, or there was kind of a crash. And so there's these moments, but with him, it's always magic, like nothing I've ever done. It's been the most
So what was
excited.
so that was the first phone call. What was the first meeting like? I mean, was it face to face or was it a Zoom or because obviously you're in different parts of the country?
He had Adidas fly me to New York to go meet him in person. He called me every night until I agreed to come see him.
So he wasn't
Wow.
keen at first then? He wasn't jumped at then?
Well, it was literally like, Kanye, like, I want it and I want it now. And so he's like, I really want you to work with me. I'm like, okay, think about it. So I'm like, I'm thinking. And he called me the next night. Hey, have you thought about it? And I'm like, yeah, I've been thinking about it. And then the next night, oh, you're thinking about it? I'm like, I'm really thinking about it. And so finally I said, all right. So they flew me to New York to go meet him. And it was really cool. We had some great conversations. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, by the way, I thought I was going to New York for 2 days. And they're like, oh, we're flying to Detroit tomorrow morning. We changed your flights and your hotels and everything. I was like, what? My wife thinks I'm in New York for 2 days, right? Like, nah, we're going to Detroit. Like, why are we going there? Like, well, we're on tour. I said, I didn't know that. So off we go to Detroit, and we hung out some more, talked some more. I did a little sketching. He's like, it's amazing, and I didn't know it, but he had my work on the wall. And he's like, see, I researched you, you were the guy. And so he's like, oh, we got to do the show. You coming to the show? Like, I'll go to the show. And I was like, you got a seat for me? He goes, I got a seat for you. I'm like, okay, I'll go. And I didn't know what I was getting into in Detroit, going to a rap show. And I went there, and it was.
So let me just sorry to interrupt. You've never seen a Kanye West show before this time?
No.
Good and blindfolded.
St. Pablo. And we go to Detroit, and I'm with Wex, and we're just the first row off the floor section. And we were, the stage started out at the other end of the arena, and he was floating around on it, and comes over halfway through the show. It stops right in front of us, and he starts the rant. I knew about the rants because, how he talked about his politics and religion and stuff, and that ended up in the media. So he stopped the show, and he was like, I want y'all to know we're going to be taking Yeezy design to a whole new place. He's like, I got the master futurist right there.
Wow.
Show you things you've never seen before. And I was like, what's happening? Wex and the Adidas designers were like, we think you got the job. I said, I haven't said yes yet, but this is pretty nuts. And so that was his way of like, yes.
We've probably read so many different things about Kanye and things like that. And I remember listening to a interview with, I can't remember his name, the guy who does this Fear of Gods. I can't remember his name now.
Jerry Lorenzo.
Sorry?
Lorenzo.
Yeah,
Lorenzo.
Jerry.
Oh yeah, the Fear of God stuff.
Yeah, and he said that he'd met Kanye at a show, and Kanye invited him back, and he just had a white t-shirt on. And as soon as he come in, Kanye just looked at the collar and went, I love what you've done with that. I know what it takes to get into that. So he's very meticulous about everything. That's what I sense from articles I've read and things like that. Is that what you found when you worked with him, or?
Yeah, we're very focused. We explore a lot. We're on a creative journey. We do a lot, as you've seen from the Forbes photographs of all the samples and prototypes, to get us to a place, which is fun because it's discovery, and we can make anything, so let's do it. And that's refreshing. For some people it's crushing because they can't keep up with that pace.
The magnitude of it it seems universal, like anything's possible. That must but I mean,
if you can dream it, we can make it.
Well, and this thing, listening to you and your story and your history, that's probably the most ideal place for you, isn't it?
Exactly. It's like I've worked my entire career, learned everything I've learned to be at this point. If you told me 5 years before I was doing this, you're going to be working with this guy, Kanye West. And I'm like, yeah, whatever, you know. And like, now it just seems like it was always meant to be, you know.
Yeah. So how do you, I mean, you've obviously worked with a lot of athletes and things like that. And do you find that the athletes you work with know what they want as much as, say, Kanye has an eye vision of what he wants? Or is it that they're...
Some of them.
Right.
Some of them.
Do they get what they want? Or is it like that situation with, like you just said, with Grant, where he thought he was getting what he wanted, but then got something else?
Yeah, it depends. You know, when we were at Nike, I was working with Tim Montgomery on what became the Monster Fly Spike, which became the Shox Monster trainer, as well as a companion to that, as the consumer-based product versus the track spike. And then we ended up, people were scared of it, you know, because I didn't want to, when you do some shoe like that with the Shox column and the heel, and it really looks, you know, because he was like, I want something like Jesse Owens, you know, sticking it to the Nazis. And so that was the, if you look at the upper, it's very simple with some perfs, but techie materials, minimalist, from that kind of Jesse Owens late 30s era Olympics.
Yeah, just cut around the ankle and quite...
Yeah, and it has just a super tech bottom with the Shox that lifted you into the launch position like you were in the blocks for the entire sprint. And that was kind of the intent of it. And a lot of athletes were scared of it, you know, because it looked like nothing else they had ever tried. And I didn't want someone to have that sprung on them, because at the Olympics, you know, it's every 4 years. And if you blow some kid's chance, that's the Olympics. Yeah. You know what I mean? That's finals. You can't screw up someone's career with some questionable product, but we believed it was right. And there was a young kid, Sean Crawford, and he's like, give it to me, I'll run in it. We're like, well, be careful, you know. And he's like, no, I'll do it. Dude goes out, wins the gold medal. And you're like, okay, I did check. That was right.
So that works.
That worked, even though it wasn't designed with Sean. It was designed with Tim, and you know, it worked. Same with the Spectrum. You know, the Spectrum was originally designed for like 15-year-old Japanese Ekinen running teenagers, and Paula Radcliffe goes and breaks the women's world record in it. You know, that was another one of those magic moments where she did that and then took the shoes off right after the finish, signed them, put the time on it, and handed them to me. Yeah. So
really? So you was there then, or?
Yeah, it was pretty amazing.
Wow.
You know, and those are those moments that are.
You still got those shoes? They're not on eBay, are they?
No, put away.
Aiden's been quite quiet.
What's that?
Aiden's been quite quiet. Anything you want to ask, mate? He's very intently listening, I'm sure.
Yeah. I just wanted to take this as an opportunity for like learning, to be honest, because like speaking to somebody like yourself who's been involved in this culture, this like something that's like completely changed my life and put me in a position where I can experience different things. Listening to everything you have to say, I could listen to you all day, to be completely honest. So yeah, I mean, I have 1,000,001 questions, but like the main question I really wanted to ask was, on my YouTube platform, which is still an evolving platform, I kind of find that half of my audience is split towards like the aesthetic side of like footwear, and the other half is kind of like performance based. So I kind of wanted to ask somebody like yourself who's worked on so many different models, what really comes first in your sketch, in your design, in your process? Are you always thinking about performance over like aesthetics, or is it like aesthetics alongside even like how do you really balance that out, and like what really takes the focus in your design?
I think it's a 50-50 split, you know. I mean, it's rooted in the athlete and the human foot and human performance, because at the end of the day, that's where it goes. So it should work. It should look good. You know, one of the things I always talk about is, you know, having been in this industry since its infancy, is it was easier. Nothing's ever easy, but it was easier because we were competing with ourselves early on. And this is one I talked about in another interview, in that you know, we were looking at what Nike was doing. You know, you're at New Balance, you're looking at what Nike was doing. And Reebok early on, as it was starting to grow, Adidas, and that was your competition. And then when I was at Reebok, when we built this innovation team, all of a sudden the Walkman came out. And we're like, oh crap, we've got to compete with that for $100 from the kids. And so it changed the things like that, changed the game, you know, because all of a sudden I'm not just competing against Nike or Adidas, I'm competing against Sony. And that's a big Goliath for you to go after as David. So all of a sudden, and then cell phones. So you got Nokia and Motorola, and it opened the door to this whole different level of competition for the $100 from the kid and the consumer. Like, I got to make something that's so compelling for a shoe that I can get that $100 away from them instead of Sony or Nokia. And that changed the game for us. You know, that was a big thing. So, I mean, it's either step it up and survive or give up and die. And so it's like, I like the fight. So let's go. Hey, hold my beer. And, you know, things like the Fury came out of that. Again, it was equipment. It was interactive, like a music player or something. You know, it had to be different enough and compelling enough to get that kid's money. You know, it's not a greed or capitalism. It's just that it changed the game for us when you had to compete against something outside of your business. So anyway, I mean, if that helps.
Yeah.
It was definitely a new challenge, you know. And it's funny, we talk about the tech and all that, and computers and research labs and data simulators of things. You know, here's the original model of the Fury heel, and it was, you know, here it is, 8/21/1992. I hand built this model with one of our model makers, all out of balsa and bondo, and showing how the hexalite would go in there, and it's all hand carved and done by hand, you know, because that's the way it was done.
Yeah.
And you know, something that people think is futuristic went to like the crudest form of development. Because again, you know, these drawings of these models are communication tools for us. I need to tell somebody in Korea who doesn't speak any English, this is what I want. And if you send them a drawing, you're going to get something that's flat. But once you start sculpting and shaping, and they have it in their hand, they really understand what it's about. And this one was really funny because it was a pristine model. And they were like, can we show it to our mold maker just so they really understand? So I gave it to them. They had it for 5 minutes. The thing came back like filthy, dirty, and it's like, where was it? Did you drag it down the street? You know, did you bury it in the ground? So
anyway. For
Anyway.
yourself then, that must, like, when you're walking down the streets and you're just walking through, and without someone actually knowing your history, who you are,
Yeah.
how does it feel just to walk, look at people's shoes? Because I'm sure yourself, you're a bit of a sneakerhead as well. So when you look
my
at
eyes
someone's
never
shoes
leave the ground.
and you see everybody, like you see just like 10, 15 people in a row walking past you wearing something you've designed. Like that's got to be
It's
amazing.
a crazy feeling. You know, I always say I look at them as my children. They've grown up and made me proud. They're everywhere. Especially if you go to, you know, Asia, Japan. So I can't go more than 5 feet to see something that I touched with, you know, 37 plus years of this with these different brands. And it's mind blowing in some ways to see something like a 574, a 996 or 997 still relevant 37 years later. And it's funny, E. Scott Morris, I don't know if you guys know him, but look him up. He was one of the great designers I worked with at Reebok. He would just crack up. He goes, dude, you're the only person in this business who's competing with your entire career simultaneously. You know, the first shoes you designed are competing against with the latest shoe you designed 37 years later on the wall. And when you go to a sneaker shop in Tokyo and half the wall is there's your portfolio. Just go look in that store right there.
Yeah, wow.
You know, go to Atmos, there's my career on the wall. It's pretty mind-blowing. And to this day, still, if I see somebody in an airport or even walking down the street here in Oregon, I'll be, hey, I designed that in 1986. Thank you for still liking my design. You know,
Wow.
Stay humble about it, because it's like, holy crap, somebody appreciated my design that much still. I did the right thing, you know, regardless of whether it was the right thing for my career path or to accumulate wealth. It was the right thing for a creative, which means more than anything, because the things that I created are continually and eternally relevant, which is really that, as a designer, is the most satisfying thing. Like, yes, people are still appreciating my art, and to me that's more important than money or status or whatever. It's like, it's right there in front of me. You can't deny it. You can't deny my impact.
Yeah.
I've changed history. I've created history. You know, Fury was in the Smithsonian and in the London Design Museum. It's in the Bata Shoe Museum as part of their permanent collection. The Yeezys are now too. The 500 and the Wave Runner are now part of permanent collections in these art museums and things. And I never imagined that's what I would do. I just was happy to get a job where I could run at lunch, you know, and it was cool. It's been a lot of fun. It's cool, you know.
I mean, I think we're going to be finishing off soon, but I've got a question. We usually have one of the guys who's usually here is Reggie. Blazer.
You're going to do his two. do his Reggie's too, because I think it for him.
But he loves New Balance. I mean, he even, we've AKA'd him the Prince of New Balance. And we always have a kind of to and fro, because I've never really been a fan of New Balance. Honest, you know, like on a look wise, you know, when I growing up, my dad had New Balance and that kind of thing, and you know, and I was like, well, I don't want his shoes or my own shoes. But what the question was, why did New Balance? Why was it always numbers? Like, you know, like there was always names for different trainers. Why did they always use numbers? Was it just something what was always there before you went in, or was it something
it was there before I was there, and the numbers denoted the price point. So the 900 series started with the 990, and that was the first $100 shoe. 1300 was $130. 1500 was $150. They were price points.
Right. Because I couldn't.
So it was the initial zero style, you know, patient zero. And then it was like 991, 992. So those became variants of that patient zero of like the 900 series, the 1500 series. And that was the origin of it, was price points. You know, and then you had shoes like the Super Comp that was a racing flat. So it never had a number. But, you know, I keep this one because the Super Comp was the shoe I wanted as a kid, as a teenager. And people think of New Balance as gray dad shoe, but I mean, they made this thing in the 70s, you know, it's just badassery.
But this is the thing, I love that design. And I was saying to the boys before you came on that there was a New Balance I want to get, and I can't remember the number of it, but it's almost like that. They've just redesigned it. It comes up at the front, it's up at the back, like that one. If any New Balance I get, it would be that design rather than anything else on New Balance, because that was a shoe my dad never had. You know?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. It's like it's kind of been known as the Stephen Smith toe, because it kind of came from the Fury. It's on the Wave Runner, but I mean, it started right here because that was the object of desire that I wanted.
Right.
So I always loved this snake tongue tip And
Yes.
so that became like an ingredient of some of my most famous designs, you know.
Yeah.
But this was the shoe I wanted, and my parents couldn't afford it at the time. And you know, again, it's I think it's kind of how we're all into this. It's like there's these desirable things that we just, for some reason, we're drawn to it and have to have it. And you know, that's how I create. But that's the one I wanted.
Yeah. So I mean,
That answers Reggie's first question. Do you like New Balance? His second question normally is, do you have any? I'm guessing you have a few. I'm guessing you
Oh
probably
yeah,
quite
you know,
impressive.
one of the young designers at New Balance, Charlotte Lee, she did the new 327 that has the vibes of this.
that's it. 327s. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
She did an amazing job of capturing the DNA and modern vintage in creating that shoe, because it's one of those that's timeless. It's from today, but it could have been from yesterday. It could be from tomorrow. You don't know. I mean, and that's a good thing to have in your design. So she like knocked it out of the park with that one. And so like, it's one of those where I always say, kids ask me for advice. I'm like, design the shoe I wish I did, you know, because they're like, what do you like? I'm like, or what changes the game, or what would make me a great designer? I said, design the shoe I wish I did. And that's one of those where she did something I wish I did. It's an amazing shoe, and I had to get a pair, so I have a pair of those. The Sam Pierce from the UK office occasionally sends me some of the new styles if there's spins on my versions. He got me the gold 1500s, which are amazing looking. And then I bought some. I mean, I bought some 574s because I never had a pair, because they came out just as I left. And then my 996s, I gave them all away to my friends who didn't have good jobs when I left New Balance. And so I never had a pair. And so a guy from, you know, a huge New Balance collector from the East Coast sent me a dead stock pair where the midsole had crumbled. And so I reached out to Sam, and Sam sent me a new pair of the retro sole units from the factory, and then the Adidas sample room ladies helped me put it together and rebuild the shoes. So I finally have my 996s.
Wow.
And then I did just recently buy another pair off of eBay of these blue ones that were really pretty. So yeah, it's kind of fun to see your stuff still selling and doing well. And
it's brilliant that you have to buy your own style as well.
you
So
know,
that I have to buy my own Furies. I designed it, but I'll buy my own.
well, Reebok's been really good about supplying me with all the new drops in my size, and they let me know if they're going to do a collab or something. Like, what do you think of this? It's awesome, you know. You guys do what you want. You own it.
Hitting up Steven Spielberg like that. You're doing Jurassic Park on my shoe.
I'm just happy that they still support it, and you know that they acknowledge the contribution of you doing it, even though you don't work for them anymore. It's kind of nice that they talk about you.
Do you feel that the newer generation appreciate what you've done more rather than the people who worked with you at the time?
I think so.
I mean, we've got the benefit of hindsight, haven't we? And we've seen what's gone on and what's happened, and you know, there's a full circle of a lot of things.
Well, it's very funny. Earlier in my career, the companies didn't want you to be known, because in the 90s, you could be quickly stolen away by another company. Wow. You know, they would make you some crazy offer, and you'd be like, oh, I'll go do that. And you know, I was dedicated to the companies I was at. So I wasn't easily lured away. But the companies kept you quiet because they're like, well, who did the Fury? Like, we really want to talk about that because somebody will try and steal them. And you know, and so it was kind of quiet. They didn't talk about it. Same with Nike. They picked like 3 people. These are going to be the faces. And those became the spokesperson of the faces. And the rest of us kind of toiled away in the workshop. behind the scenes. But you know, as the industry has grown and people are more interested and intrigued by the origins of these things, they wanted to know. And it's because of my associations in the business, you know, like Woody from Sneaker Freaker and that, we're good friends. And so he'll call me, like when the Supreme picked the Spectrum to relaunch, Woody called me, he goes, this reeks of you. Did you design this one? And I'm like, yeah, because Nike would never say it, because I work with Kanye. Yeah. Last thing we're gonna do is give that guy credit. But the industry guys now know, like Woody's like, you did that, didn't you? I said, yeah. So, you know, then it's publicly out there. It didn't come from their PR system, but you know, people figure it out. Or I'll say, like, I'll post the sketch. I'm like, oh, by the way, yes, I did design that one, you know. And people are like, holy shit, you know, you've done so much stuff. I say, yeah, I've done so much, I've forgotten some of it. But yeah, you know, it's
I mean, it's good now. I mean, we've got, I'm older than these guys here. Aiden's probably the youngest one we've got on here, but you know, Aiden's knowledge on sneakers is probably better.
He's our resident historian, yeah.
You know, but it's one of those ones, you know, when you're in it, and when I was in it at my age, certain trainers come out like the Torsions, 6000s and things like that. At that time, it was the one because, you know, it had the torsion bar underneath. You'd never seen it before, you know? So you were just happy, well, I've got the torsions. You didn't even care what the name was. You didn't care who designed it. It was just the torsions. But then as you go on and, you know, like you said, you know, when you was younger, you only got one pair and they had to last. You know,
choose wisely.
Yeah. So, you know, you got to choose wisely. Yeah, exactly. So, but now when you've probably beaten those trainers and you try and get them again, you want to know the history behind it because it had that link to that desire at that time. So yeah, you do want to know who designers are. And I think social media has really helped on that part.
Oh, definitely.
You know, I think we'd still never know, you know.
I'm just loving to see the person who sits there, looks at their collection and goes, oh wait, there, my whole collection is Stephen Smith and I didn't even realize.
Well, it's kind of funny. I finally asked Kanye, like, why me? And he's like, bro, you designed all the shoes I wanted as a teenager. Who wouldn't want that guy designing for him? I'm like, yeah, good point.
Yeah.
You know,
I do think like when people do collabs and that, if I ever had the chance to do a sneaker collab, I'd want to know who originally designed it, because I wouldn't want to step on their toes. I wouldn't want to ruin what they were thinking behind that, you know, just the respect of it. You know, we've got a guy, we've done a podcast with a guy over here. He's nicknamed the King of Trainers. It wasn't.
Oh yeah, I know him. I follow him.
Right.
Oh, Franklin. Yeah.
Franklin.
He's great.
And he had you know, he was asked by Elise to do design. And the first thing he said, he went back and looked in their archive to see where it came from, you know, from his own childhood and things like that. And I think that's a lot of people now would want, like, if ever New Balance came to me and said, right, here you go, Pat, I'd be calling you and saying, right, where did you start? You know, or add any overlays to this or any different colors, what was the basis? And it's nice that we get to see people who done that original things, and makes us when we're sitting there taking them out of the box and feeling all giddy like kids are. But you know, so yeah, I just want to say thank you, and it's great that your name's out there, and I'm hoping we get to put it out there even more. So
yeah, it's been fun, you know.
Yeah, I think this is for us and me personally. I think you get a kind of air of how people are, and you could have come on here being arrogant as anything, like, oh, I've done this, done it. You're such a humble bloke. Like, you're a genuinely nice guy. I could sit here for the rest of, if it weren't my tea time, I could sit here for hours, you know, and just genuinely listen to you, because I think you are a well of knowledge that I'm glad, you know, had we have tried to do something like this 10 years ago, it'd be like writing an email and waiting for the modem to kick up and everything like that. And it'd be so difficult. Yeah, that's it. So to have this experience now, for me personally, thank you so much for coming on, because I think it's been thrilling, and I think if this isn't the most listened to episode, I'll be surprised, to be honest.
It's kind of funny, you know. I have my old Porsche, and one of the guys who used to work out at the restoration shop, he did distributors and carburetor only. And that's what he restored. And I was like, can you teach me some of this stuff so I know how to do it? No, I'm not sharing it. You'll undercut me. And I'm like, so that to me was like the antithesis of what I wanted to be. So like, I want to tell the stories. I want people to understand the truth, the fact right from the source, as opposed to hear it secondhand or have somebody else create a lie or a narrative about what really happened or what it was about. So spread the knowledge, spread the, people are interested in this. They're excited about it, help them out. Yeah. Tell the stories, because when you're gone, like with him, he died. All the knowledge is gone. He could have shared it with me, and he could have planted a seed that became a tree, and instead he chose to just let it die on the vine. And so I've always been happy to share and tell the stories and spread the knowledge, because when I'm gone, it goes with me. So I might as well share it while I'm here.
So sorry, are you working exclusively with Kanye now? Is it just on his products? And yeah. And not asking for any exclusives, because that would be wrong, but just want to know if there's anything coming out in the future.
No,
this don't go out for another month, so you're fine to share something that's out in a month's time, because they ain't getting to hear it.
Yeah. You never know what's coming or when.
Don't worry, I've signed the same contract. I work for Adidas. I understand.
Yeah, but it's like
it'd be rude if we never. We don't worry. We're only joking. Don't worry. But
there's only one person who knows when that album's coming out, and it's the same with the new projects with the sneakers.
Good.
No, but genuinely, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on, Stephen. Just for one last time, just give yourself a shout out. Tell people where they can contact you if they want to know some more stories or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, Instagram's kind of the only social media I'm on anymore. I got tired of negativity on the other platforms, so you can find me just at Stephen Smith at Instagram. Pretty simple. Not Stephen A. Smith. I'm not the sports guy from ESPN. And, I'm not the cricket player. So I get tagged as the cricket player a lot, because people never go look to see who has the name Stephen Smith on Instagram. So they're like, can you believe they're bringing Stephen Smith back? I sent him here. And I'm like, where am I going? And I'm like, oh, it's
well, what we do when we put the video, we try and put a picture of your Instagram, make sure we get it right.
But the wrong one. So yeah, everyone else, shout out your socials. So Pat.
Okay, so it's Patrick Townsend on YouTube, Patrick T3 on Instagram. Steve, you'll notice my branding's very bad here, so don't worry about it. But yeah, you can catch me on Instagram, YouTube channel, and here on sWo podcast.
Yeah. So it's Aidan from ACS Sneakers. It's been an absolute pleasure being part of this. Never going to forget this experience. So really appreciate being able to talk to you and listen to your stories and see some of the designs. So yeah, you can find me if you want to find me. I'm not as influential, but trying to be. ACS Sneakers, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all that good stuff. I'll be here every week on sWo podcast. But thank you again for being part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I may make it to the UK yet. The McLaren guys keep inviting us over to come see their shop and hang out with them. So at some point we'll be over.
Yes,
great.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Need to get an autograph on wave runners. I need an autograph on my wave runners. So yeah, I would love to whenever I'll be following you. Ready for when you to come over, so I'll be bringing my shoes for that autograph.
That's brilliant. And just for me, as just basically the producer of this, it's again, thank you for coming on, because we're not a massive podcast by any means, but I think the repertoire of the guests we've had on are just getting bigger and bigger and just amazing. And to kind of have someone of your kind of caliber come on, whether we get even bigger or anything, just for us personally, that this means more than any listenership. Because for me as a sneakerhead and an enthusiast, to be able to kind of talk to someone who's designed a lot of shoes that I've owned, a lot of shoes that I wear, in itself has been amazing. So I'm Ashley Clark, 5 for the S, and on Instagram. And as always, just follow us on sWo Podcast. And for now, that's it. Peace. Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.